In this video, I'm doing a general Linux distribution education and which one you should choose. So this is just my follow-up. I have another video, the best Linux version out there, or Linux distribution out there. And I did that video. It was one of my very first Linux videos, and I really wanted to update it just to kind of educate you, the user, and also help you pick out a distribution depending on your needs. To that end, I want to kind of show what the general Linux distribution timeline looks like. Pretty much the first one starts in 92 and it goes all the way up to today, obviously. And it is vast. And when I say vast, I mean it is vast. If you start to look at all the Linux distributions, it's a lot. So what I did for this video was to basically dumb this down into the big distributions that everyone either forks their project off of or borrows heavily from that code. And I'm also going to basically throw X's out there for users that you really should not use certain distributions from these. Well, let's get going and start with the Debian branch of Linux. Almost every popular distribution is based on Debian. Now, I don't ever recommend a new person installing vanilla Debian, but a vet, I have no problems with, because there's many customizations that like Ubuntu has made that makes life a little bit easier for the new person out there. When you're looking through this, just keep in mind most of these distributions are either depreciated or just complete trash. So I don't recommend just distro hopping all the way through it. I honestly have a big problem and make fun of many YouTubers that say, hey, here's 100 different distributions, choose one. No, that is not how you should be choosing Linux or your version of Linux. So Debian's where you start. It's almost a given. And off of this branch, I kind of put a logo of Ubuntu right here in the middle, and I'm going to zoom in on that a little. This kind of gives you a good bearing of what you should expect when getting to Ubuntu. Now, every other popular distribution is based on Ubuntu, and in my eyes, all they are is just a different look. There's not really a big functionality change between Ubuntu and many of these distributions. So I'm going to just read off real fast some of these distributions that so many people recommend and use. And to me, it's just Ubuntu with a little bit different of a skin, because functionality wise, they operate pretty much the same. Most of the install commands are the exact same on both of these systems. So Ubuntu is your standard one. You can look at videos and say, hey, that's kind of what I'm looking for as far as a look. And I've even made a video, I'll link up here in the top, that shows you how to change Ubuntu to look like Windows or OS X or pretty much anything you want it to look like. It does like 3 big ones of those, just so you get a good bearing, and then you can customize a little bit from there. But if you don't want to do that and you just want out of the box a look, that's where these other distributions come in my mind. So I'm going to just go through some of them. Kubuntu, that's like a KDE version, so you can look at KDE Ubuntu. There's Lubuntu, which is like a lightweight Ubuntu. It doesn't come with a lot of the nice aesthetics, but it can work on a really old machine just fine. There's KDE Neon, which is like a newer version of KDE that looks pretty snazzy. There's Peppermint and Elementary, which are just offshoots. I don't recommend them, but they're very, very popular. So that's there. When I come into this, I always recommend people go to this one, which is Linux Mint. It's like has a really good Windows vibe to it. So if you're coming from Windows to the Linux world, Linux Mint's usually, I say, that's where you should start. If you don't like Linux Mint, try Ubuntu if you want a different look and feel. It's just a little bit harder getting around when you're first coming to it. But this is a great starting point, and this is the Debian fork. And what makes all these distros pretty much the same is a lot of them use the same package manager, which is apt. So when you see online apt install whatever package, it could be VirtualBox or whatever it might be, it's just going to go out to the repository and install that program for you. So when you see the apt command, you're almost always dealing with a Debian-based system, and most of those are universal for all these distributions. However, the two main distributions you should be focused on is Debian and Ubuntu. If it's Linux Mint or any of these other flavors, knock yourself out. But honestly, I would rather recommend someone go with Ubuntu and learn how to modify it once you get your feet wet. If you're coming from Windows and you're just not very tech savvy, Linux Mint is a great option for that, as it's very similar to the Windows look and feel. But that's it for this section of Linux. I hope you got a lot from this section, and it's one of the big things most beginners should focus on. And I don't recommend you drop out of the Debian realm or distribution blanket for all these, and I recommend just sticking to the ones I mentioned today. But this video is about the whole of Linux, so let's go ahead and continue on. Okay, this next one is going to be the SUSE branch. And I know what you're thinking. Early in the video I kind of said, hey, this is 92 all the way back here, all the way to present. Well, Slackware is before SUSE. Well, if SUSE is a fork of Slackware, should I ever install Slackware? No. Don't ever install Slackware. It's just a bad idea. And for one reason and one reason only. Their package manager is basically crap. I'm trying to think of a good reason. There's going to be some veteran Linux guys that are probably going to get on here and flame me, but it's just junk. You go to install packages in Slackware and it's unable to find dependencies. That makes it useless in my mind, and you might as well just go to the GitHub and build it from source. And that's why Slackware is just crap. I don't like it. I don't think it's a good version of Linux. And no more to really be said there. I'm not going to stick on it, but it is also one of the very, very first distributions of Linux, and that's why it's still going. It's still being developed, but it's I don't like it. I don't recommend it to anybody, a vet, a new person, an intermediate. Nobody should use it other than to install it once, tinker around, figure it out, and then never use it again. But SUSE's a completely different beast, a different story altogether. Now, it has been developed just a year after Slackware, as you see on the chart, and it has continued on. And then OpenSUSE came in, I think that's like around 2010, and it is a very, very popular. A lot of popular Linux YouTubers, such as like Brian Lunduk or the Linux Gamer, they both use OpenSUSE from what I know. And I have installed it. I've kind of tinkered around with it. I have not done it as my daily driver. And I really liked what I saw, but when I did install it, I had some issues that at the time, I didn't have enough time to work through all those and really give a video review and a tutorial of how to use it. But I still, obviously if those guys are using it, it's got to be one of the top distributions, and it works a lot differently than many other ones, as a lot of the system configuration is done in something called YAST. The package managers like Zipper is, I think, what it's called, and it does find like dependencies and other things. And that's why SUSE, OpenSUSE, is really the king of what I recommend people. Regular SUSE, like, hey, why don't you use that? Well, that actually requires a subscription, much like Red Hat requires a subscription to install. OpenSUSE, on the other hand, anybody can install it. And that's the difference between the two. There may be some other ones. I think OpenSUSE runs a little bit of bleeding edge, much like Fedora does to Red Hat. And that's where they test out a lot of things. And OpenSUSE has a rolling release like an Arch Linux, which means everything stays up to date. On, I think it's Tumbleweed that has the rolling release, where Leap is more of a Ubuntu style, where it updates every 6 months to a year, I believe. So let's go into Red Hat Linux. This guy is awesome. I love Red Hat, I love CentOS, I love Fedora, and that's what we're talking about here. And it is very big in the Linux space. If you see RPM packages like DaVinci Resolve, and a lot of enterprise or business grade applications, all tailored around these three individuals. It's because they're just rock solid. They don't update very often in the case of CentOS and Red Hat, such as Red Hat's just now releasing beta 8, and it has been on version 7 for 5 years or some crap. I mean, it's been a long time since the last major release. CentOS lags behind Red Hat, but it's a free version of Red Hat. Red Hat, like SUSE, runs on a subscription-based service, and you have to pay for it, where CentOS is completely free, and you can just install, and it runs, I think, usually about 6 months behind Red Hat, depending. It's community-driven, so that's why. But both very, very solid releases, and if you're doing like a web server, a lot of times I prefer to run one of these because I know it's just going to run and run and run until I go and turn the dang thing off, because that's just how it is, or if it has hardware failure, because these OSs just go forever. Great for anything. That's why, RHEL or RHEL, those acronyms, it's Red Hat Enterprise Linux. That's what it stands for. And they are meant for business. Now, the Fedora, well, that's meant for you. If you're going into business and you want to do Linux in a business, you need to probably install Fedora on your home machine, as most of the package managers, it uses Yum. And these two use Yum. I believe the new versions that are coming out, RHEL 8 should be releasing in 2019 finally, and CentOS should follow shortly thereafter. And they will switch the package manager to DNF. And Yum is what they are on right now. Both are pretty much the same. DNF's a little bit better about finding dependencies, where Yum is still a little bit older. People have released like Yum 4 that helps with that, but overall, I highly recommend just using DNF when you can. If you're using Fedora, most of your install commands will be DNF. And if you're using an older version of CentOS or Red Hat, 7 and before, it's all going to be Yum. But that's it for this branch. I'm not going to mention any of these other distributions because I don't recommend any of them. The only thing that I might pause to say is, hey, Oracle Linux, that's interesting, but not something I recommend someone doing. It's going to be one out of maybe 100 businesses that are going to be running that. Most of all this other stuff is all going to be those three are the ones you need to learn. Everything else, there might be the obscure business that uses it, but for the most part, nobody else is going to be messing with it, and you shouldn't either. These are the three you should stick to in this fork. And if you're just getting into it and you want to learn enterprise Linux, stick with Fedora, tinker around. A lot of people like to run it as its main thing. On my work PC, it's what I run. I use Fedora 29. I'm bleeding edge at work. For this, at home, I use a Debian-based system, but this is what I'm using right now. All right, let's jump into the final part I wanted to go over. Arch Linux. Now, you're jumping right over Gentoo. What's up with that? Well, it's kind of like a running joke. It's like, hey, you must be a masochist if you use Gentoo, because you have to install pretty much everything. It's extremely modular, which means it doesn't come loaded with anything. You're installing from command line, and then you're installing the display manager, then you're installing the desktop, and then you're installing like the clock or all kinds of crazy things in there. So it's very, very modular. One use case for Gentoo would be if you were to build a specific Linux box to do one thing or two things, and you only wanted to install those specific programs and you didn't need any of the other flair to go with it. Gentoo would be an option in that case because it pretty much comes bare bones and you just build it up. Now, some people are like, well, that kind of sounds like Arch. Not quite. And I'm going to tell you right now, Arch is kind of the same way. It's both these packages are meant for very advanced users. You install it from a command line. They don't come with a desktop experience, and you have to pick your desktop manager. And that's really important to know because it is a long laundry list of things to get it going. Arch, it has what's called Arch user repositories. And people love these, rave about them. I haven't personally used Arch extensively as in a desktop environment before, so I'm going to be doing that soon and doing like a 10-day experience over the entire Arch experience from install to daily driver usage. But Arch itself, once you get it going, it does have Arch user repositories, which make it very easy to install pretty much any program that's in those repositories. Everything else you're going to be building from source if it's not in the Pacman package manager. And Pacman is a very good package manager. I highly recommend it, but it's not as extensive as Debian is. Now, the very first rebuttal someone will tell me, a big hardcore Arch user, is, well, Arch is far more up to date. A lot of Debian's repositories are dated. And that is true. When you go to install, let's say, GIMP today in Debian, or a Debian-based distribution, it's going to install, I think, GIMP 2.8, which is the older version of GIMP. Now, I think it's 2.1. I don't know how the actual numbers went less than GIMP, but that's another video altogether on the GIMP development team. But the newer version of GIMP is installed by default on Arch, as is everything, because the entire distribution's a rolling release. You always get the latest and greatest, the bleeding edge. Keyword bleeding edge, because there's going to be times where things might not work 100% because it is literally patching, on a weekly basis. So it will continue to patch, and I like it for that because, hey, you get to see what's coming out very soon, where in Ubuntu-based distributions, you might be waiting 6 months if you don't manually go in and update the kernel or go in and download the newest up-to-date repository and manually install that version of like GIMP per se. But that's Arch and Gentoo in a nutshell. I kind of lump these together. They are not anything alike from each other, and Gentoo is very, very different from Arch, but they have the same philosophy. That's kind of why I kind of put them together in this segment. So those are the major things that you deal with when it comes to Linux. I hope that sheds a little more light. Out of the four main packages, Arch, Red Hat, Debian, and OpenSUSE, or SUSE. Those are the four you need to know about. They use different package managers, they function differently, but the very underlying thing about Linux is they're all running on the same kernel, and you can pretty much build any program from source on all of these distributions. So I'm not singling one out. It just goes about it in a lot of different ways. So when you talk to, Linus Torvalds, he's like, I don't really care. It's all the same to me, which I get that. And I think a lot more Linux users need to get that as well. We need to stop going from distribution to distribution to distribution. You need to stick to these big dogs. I think all these fragmentation that's happened in the space has done nothing but bad things for Linux as a whole. It's why there's no adoption. They need to be run by someone with backing, whether it's a company, whether it is just an established group, a collective, like Arch. Arch is community driven. If that's your thing, go with Arch. If you're an advanced user, go with Arch. If you're wanting more backing and you want a company, go with SUSE or Debian. You know, both Debian and Ubuntu, those are big companies that help maintain them. Same with Red Hat. Red Hat is more of a tried and true. A lot of people don't like the fact that, you know, it runs such old kernels or old software, but it's built for stability and reliability. And that's why you'd use like that Red Hat or CentOS. And that's just a broad stroke of what Linux is, what distributions you should be looking at and choosing, and why on this channel I'm not going to be jumping around. On this YouTube channel, you're not going to go, hey, what's the distribution of the week? I'm going to say, get a life. Go check out the hundreds of other YouTube channels that have just a huge amount of distributions. That's not going to be my channel. My channel is going to be focused on actual Linux knowledge, because when it gets down to it and you get knowledgeable enough, the distribution does not matter. And these 4 distributions, I honestly encourage, start with Debian, but work your way through all 4 of them, because they fundamentally work differently from the different package managers. Once you get 2 or 3 under your belt, you'll start to learn, oh, well, a lot of these things are the same. It's just a matter of building and compiling this certain program that may not be on here, or adding this repository so my package manager can install that program. And pretty much all of them work that way. It's just a matter of learning the syntax for that specific distribution. And out of those 4, you should have a good grasp. Now, one thing I didn't mention in this video is like Android and other offshoots of Linux. I don't consider them viable, even though Android is technically open source and it's all the way, you know, used on every mobile phone. It's just a whole different beast together. And for this, I mainly want to limit it to desktop computers, and that's why I stuck to these 4 branches of Linux that I think every person should know about and every person should try and use. But I don't recommend people going and just distro hopping all the way through everything and doing like 20 distros in Debian, you know, the Debian branch. I just don't get it. I'll install something on a VirtualBox just to show you what it's about, but I don't recommend just having all these every which way. And I didn't make that clear in my first video, and after really using Linux for a bit now, that's kind of my conclusion I'm coming to, that I really like to stick with like a vanilla Ubuntu and then just customize it to look like a Linux Mint if I want that, or a KDE style and install KDE on Ubuntu and just customize it myself instead of relying on these other distros that just popped up. You should not choose your distribution over how it looks. You can make any distribution look how you want it to look. And that is the point of this video, to share that knowledge. And if you have trouble doing that, please check out my other video. You know, I have one up there, how to change Ubuntu. I forked a script and fixed it a couple times. There's a couple outdated lines that I went ahead and repaired. And that would change Ubuntu to look like OS X or Windows. And that's a very easy thing that pretty much everyone can do. Now, to the advanced users, you know you can pick out your display manager. You know you can pick out your desktop environment. All these things can be switched around at will pretty much on any distribution. And that is pretty much it for this video. I know I kind of rambled on a little bit here towards the end, and I don't want to make it any longer, but that is Linux distributions and how I see them and what you should choose, especially starting out, and then move on from there.